Good evening, day walkers and night stalkers. It's me, your twisted southern horror queen, coming to you live from under full moon right here in southeastern Louisiana. How are all you crazy kids doing tonight? Hoping all of my friends up there in the Carolinas are hanging on tight. You guys are all in our prayers. We are pain, been there, done that. Sucks. So just hang in there because it's going to get better. There's my boy Freddie Roseman. He's in the house, and there's Gavin. How you boys doing tonight? Miss seeing y'all from last week. That's right, www.authorlyngibson.com. All kind of crazy stuff on that website, right? Speaking of authorlyngibson.com, I'm good, Gavin. How are you, honey? Go all the way over to the right-hand side. You will find a tab that says The Edge Radio US. Guys, check us out. There is free streaming there, as well as a free app that you can download on your Android device. Woke up this morning and found out 91 countries are streaming us. Is that insane? We're loving it. We've got some badass tunes on there too, so check us out when you get a chance, and check out all the other crazy stuff that's going on there on the page. Got to give my shout outs real quick, get that out of the way real early in the show. So here is a big wet kiss coming at you. Renegade Racing Fuel, D&M Graphics, Surreal Studios, RJS, Racers Direct, Prolube, K&N Filters, and of course, you guys already knew this, my favorite, Naked Wines. You gotta have me a little sip of this one right here. That one's for you, Freddie and Gavin. Oh yeah, let's just make it right. That's awesome. Also, to the guys up in New York at Open Road Media, that's the one, folks, the dudes that get out there and scrounge around in the darkest corners of the planet, brushing off cobwebs and digging through all the creepy crawls in the caves and all these other scary places they go just to find all of these horrific little collectibles for us that they stick in the creepy crate. That sucker ships out every other month. Your subscription is somewhere around $15 a month, but like I was showing you guys last week, that crate had a retail value of over $75, and they're all pretty much like that. I don't know how they're affording to do it, but I'm glad they're doing it because there's a ton of crazy stuff there. T-shirts, socks, any kind of gory memorabilia you can think of. One of my favorites is my Hannibal apron. That's awesome. And then, of course, is my Michael Myers moonshine flask. I love that. And some of the T-shirts, one of my favorites is three really scary looking faces on it that says all my friends are creepy. I wear that sucker to Walmart all the time. It keeps all of the chicks out of the way, especially the old chicks. They get the hell out the way when they see me coming because it really worries them. Anyway, we are starting out this week with a little church that's in Tennessee. I think it's somewhere around Lewisburg, Tennessee. It's a Presbyterian church. It was built in the 1820s. I think 1827 was the one date that I found. I did find several dates on it. But the little sucker is still standing today, and they're actually still holding services in it. Now, I said that it was haunted. There are some ghosts that have been documented there, but I'm going to stick this one in the urban legend pile because there's a couple things there that kind of raising my eyebrows about. Thank you, Gavin. I appreciate that. Did see some new faces on there last week. As a matter of fact, I'll break in on the church thing real quick. I had this gentleman from somewhere in the Carolinas that signed on last week that was pleasant enough to inform me that I was an idiot. I thought that was fantastic. He's going to have to try a lot harder than that to insult me. But I sent him a little message and told him exactly what kind of an idiot I was, and he came back with, "You're not worth it." And he misspelled "your." I'm a grammar Nazi, and I really wanted to go back and correct him, but he appeared to be somewhere in his late 60s, early 70s, and I was raised up to where you respect your elders and all that kind of stuff. And I figured if there was any kind of, "Hey, Troy, glad to see you. Hey, Jamie, glad to see you too, sweetness." If there was any kind of advice that I could give this old fart, Would be go see your doctor, get some blue pills, make a trip out to the local truck stop and get a blowjob. Your friends and families would appreciate that. But I didn't go there because I'm getting older and a lot less hostile in my old years, my golden years, I guess you would say. But anyway, back to this little church that's in Lewisburg. It's called the Bethbirei Presbyterian Church. And it's got, when it was first built, of course, there were no roads there. Everybody was going there by horse and carriage and what have you. And since then, a road has been put in. And what that did was it split the original cemetery away from the church. So now you have the church on one side of Bethbirei Road and a newer cemetery. And across the street, you have the original cemetery. But you have to really know what's there because it's very overgrown. And the tombstones, if you want to call them tombstones, were actually just rocks with people's names carved in them. Of course, the elements have pretty much taken care of that, and you really can't see the names that were there. Hey, Sean, glad to see you jumping on board tonight. But one of the legends with this church is, of course, there are some ghosts that hang out there on the older side of the graveyard. And this is one of the things that I did find that was actually documented. Those headstones are said to glow green, and they do, and it's really kind of weird looking. It's pitch black in some of these pictures, but you can see this green glow coming from the ground. And I guess it's probably best to go out there at night when these things are glowing, and actually headstones, because it's very overgrown. There's trees, bushes, shrubs, and weeds everywhere, and you really can't see anything there except for those glowing green headstones. Say that 3 or 4 times fast, especially after you've had a glass of naked wines. But rumor has it that the people who were buried over there were pretty much the paupers and slaves from that era and from that area, as well as there's a local legend that says that somebody just lost their shit one time as this dude walks into the middle of a Sunday service and just starts shooting. This was back in the 1900s. So see, school shootings and church shootings, that's not a new thing, y'all. Just they didn't have the internet to broadcast it on back in the day. So this dude sat there and shot into the congregation until he ran out of ammunition. And it's said that the people who were shot by this lunatic are also buried across the street in the older cemetery, and that from time to time you can see them wandering around both in the church as well as out there in the cemetery. Hey Chris, glad you're jumping on board tonight. You're a new face, glad to have you here every Tuesday night, 7 Central, 8 Eastern time. Also, like we were talking about the other graveyard, now there's a whole bunch of spirits that tend to wander around over in that graveyard as well, but we'll get to those in a minute. There's been a whole lot of paranormal investigations that have been done there. And like I said, one of the things that I did find that was documented were those glowing gravestones. Now, one particular ghost hunter had a really interesting experience there. This chick and her cohort show up with their cameras, and they just start snapping random pictures. So she's taking pictures of the cemetery, and all of a sudden her camera starts to malfunction. Well, we already know here that whenever there's an electronic or a battery enabled device around these spirits, that a lot of times things kind of go awry. And she's freaking out because her camera starts displaying the pictures as she has taken them, but it starts counting backwards and displaying them backwards. So she hands the camera over to a friend of hers and says, keep it, I'm done with it. It's freaking out. There's something wrong with it. So later on, she goes home and she decides she's going to check it to see if the pictures that she took were still there. And of course they were. So she downloads them to her computer and she finds something really strange there. She said that originally she started snapping photos before they went into the cemetery. Now, the cemetery had a gate in front of it that was locked, so they jumped a fence to get in it, as some paranormal investigators do from time to time. Well, that was where she started taking pictures. But in the first pictures that she shot after she downloaded them, she said that the gate was open and the headstones were gone. And a lot of the other pictures that she had taken later on that night before she freaked out with her camera, of course, she was taking shots of those glowing green headstones. So that's kind of crazy right there. Hey, Mike, glad to see you in the house tonight, sweetheart. So besides the ghosts that hang out at the old cemetery, there's said to be some kind of creature that's spotted there from time to time. It's described as a large humanoid type creature, and some descriptions have even said that it has hooved feet and kind of resembles a goat from the waist down. This is where I'm throwing the Bethbirei church into the urban legend file right here. But they say they're comparing it to a creature, which we know those suckers have popped up all over the continental United States as well as in Canada, right, Gavin? So they can hear it rustling around in the woods outside the cemetery, and then sometimes it makes this loud roaring sound that they're comparing to the sound of a lion, a very angry lion. So the church itself, it has a few legends about it as well. Now, one of those legends in particular, which I'm also going to throw into that urban legend pile, is that if you try to steal a Bible, that the closer you get to the door with the Bible, the heavier it becomes to where you can't get it out of the door. Well, at one point in time back in the 60s, there was a group of teenagers that decided they were going to test this old legend and see if it was bogus or if there was actually something to it. Now, they didn't experience the Bible being weighted down, but from what the locals say, they were successful in getting the Bible out of the church. They hopped in their car with it, hauled ass, and the second they hit the highway, they were T-boned by a large truck that was speeding down the road. And, of course, all of them died. Now, the twist in this story is that the Bible was not found in the car. A couple of days later, it was found sitting back in the spot from where they had taken it. So, pretty cool little story there. A whole lot of other things going on. There's my boy, Trey Johnson. How are you doing, sweetheart? It's been a while since I've seen you. Chris is really digging the show. I'm like, hey, jump in anytime. By the way, if there are urban legends or haunted history that you want to know more about, just shoot me a message. Don't put it on here because I may not see the stream immediately. It may take me a little while to get back to it, but let me know because I love researching urban legends and history from all over the place. It doesn't have to be local, just anywhere in the world. Okay, so besides that, the whole Bible legend, there's a legend about a girl. The girl was said to be about 3 years old, and she was outside playing after church, and parents weren't watching her. And apparently she was playing around one of those huge angel memorials that was out in the cemetery. And I don't know exactly what happened, but it was said that the statue fell on the little girl and killed her. That 3-year-old little girl is still spotted out in the cemetery and inside the church and has been documented and photographed by a whole lot of paranormal investigators. So that throws it back into the haunted history again. But don't feel bad about her. She's not the only little girl ghost that hangs out there. There was another lucky investigator that went to the church, a while back. This one's been kind of recent from what I understand. Now, this investigator gets there and starts taking pictures of the outside of the church. And as they investigate the church, nothing really happened, and she's like, oh, well, this was a dud. Well, she gets home and she starts downloading her pictures, and she finds that the very first shot she took was a winner. In the window of the church, there were the figures of 2 little girls staring out at her. One of the little girls was wearing a bonnet, and the other little girl was fair-haired and had braided pigtails. Now, I'm not real sure which one was the one that was crushed by the monument, but it's good to know she's at least got an eternal playmate there at the Bethbirei church with her. Now, other investigators that have been there, this group said that they went in 2012. And it was their intention to go and prove that the church was not haunted. I'll stop for just a second there to say there's quite a bit of controversy, very heated controversy, where these Presbyterians are taking it personally that there's been so much investigations and so much documentation of ghosts and other creatures and things that have happened out there. They're not digging it, and they're kind of hostile about it, to be completely honest. So this group, I don't know if they went on bequest of the Presbyterians, or they just went to see if they could help out, or what the deal was, but they went in 2012 to disprove that the church was haunted. Well, they get to the church, and some of them jump the fence to get a little bit closer, and the rest of them stay in the car. So obviously they didn't have somebody's permission to be there. But the ones that are standing around the car all hear this roar coming from the cemetery beside the church, and they start kind of freaking out. And as soon as they're good and freaked out, they look up, and the folks that had went towards the church and jumped the fence come screaming like bitches back to the car to get the hell out of there. So they all apparently heard it. Well, when they jump in the car and they go to start it, the car doesn't want to start. So eventually they get the car started, and they're in panic mode. And before they could pull out of the parking lot, one of them said that they saw some huge winged creature fly over the car. So back to the urban legend part again, folks. After they get the car started, they're driving out of the parking lot. The driver says he looks in his rearview mirror and he sees this huge man-like creature running behind him, and then all of a sudden it takes to the air and he starts flying. And as they're hauling ass down the road, eventually it gave up chasing them. Now that sounds like to me they either had some kind of Jeepers Creepers madness going on, or maybe they got a hold of a bad batch of mushrooms or something. I'm not really sure what happened there, but don't sound like a good time to me. Anyway, so there's that. Freddie says, sorry for the lost mate. It's all good, Freddie. Anyway, we're going to move right along there. We're leaving the shrooms alone for the night, and we're going to talk about a vacation destination, the Dominican. No, I haven't been there yet, and I'm not real sure that I'm going to try to make a run out here. This place is called the Island of Madness, so don't break out the bikinis and Bermuda shorts just yet, folks. Let me give you a little bit of the backstory before you start updating your passports and getting all excited. The actual name of this place is Poveglia Island. There's a whole lot of different legends that are surrounding this little island. It's just one of many little islands that are sitting in the lagoons of Venice. Yeah, I know you're still seeing yourself slathered in suntan oil and holding a cocktail with a little umbrella in your hand and sitting on a sandy beach. Give that shit up, really. This is not no fantasy island. It's more like a festering blemish than anything else. And it's said to be one of the most haunted and evil locations on the entire planet. Nobody visits this place unless they're there to harvest the vineyards. I'm fairly sure that this is a domestic blend. I'm hoping so anyway. So yeah, you heard me right, vineyards. The fishermen won't even go anywhere near these shores because there's been too many times that they pull up their nets and they're full of human bones, not fish. So the dark and twisted history of Poveglia Island started way back during the Roman era. It was actually used back in the day to quarantine plague victims from the general population. Now, centuries later, Black Death rolled into Europe, and again, it was used for the same purpose. Now, these infected and rotted corpses were being dumped into massive pits there and either buried or burned or both. But as the plague continued to start claiming more and more victims, the population started to panic, and anybody that had the slightest little hack of a cough or sneezed or their eyes were runny, They were snatched from out of their houses and taken by force to this island, no matter who the hell they were, how much they screamed or pleaded. In fact, it didn't really even matter if they were still alive. They were immediately thrown onto these piles of rotting corpses and set on fire. Men, women, children, all of them left writhing in agony as their skin burned and their flesh fell away from their bones. Yeah. Let that shit sink in for just a second. It's estimated that this tiny little island saw as many as 160,000 corpses during that era alone. So yeah, this little island paradise is pretty much a putrid abomination at this point, right? But the soul of the island, combined with the charred remains of the bodies that had been dumped and burned there, created this thick layer of sticky ash, and the core of the island is actually comprised of human remains that in itself has given the joint a really dreadful, horrible reputation, but it appears to be really good for the grapevines. So, like I said, I think I'll be sticking with the domestics from here on out. But speaking of wines, I get distracted by wines. If you are a wine lover like I am, I'm not talking Boone's Farm. Granted, I love my bottle of Boone's Farm every once in a while. Nothing beats a ice cold bottle of Strawberry Hill with one of those big ass long straws on a hot summer day. But every once in a while, you want something that's a little bit more high class, especially when the in-laws or your good friends come over. Check out Naked Wines. You can subscribe to Naked Wines, and they deliver a case to your door. You don't even have to go run down to the corner liquor store. And it's good wines. I've taken the wines out of these boxes and searched them on the internet. You're getting a hell of a deal on them. If you're interested in doing that and subscribing, do like I did. You can subscribe, get your first couple of cases, fill up all your cabinets and your wine holders, and then kill your subscription. I have $100 vouchers. Throw $40 on top of that $100 voucher, free shipping. They're going to send you your first case of wine for like $40. One bottle of this wine is worth about $40. So that gives you a little idea of what's going on with Naked Wines there. If you're interested, shoot me a message and I will be happy to give you one of those vouchers. There's my girl, Susie Jones. Missed you. Hey, Crystal, glad to see you joining in tonight. Chris says, ditto, thanks, got to be painful. Yeah, that was pretty painful. I'm assuming you're talking about being burned alive and all that kind of stuff. Hey, Wiley, glad to see you jumping on board too. All right, so anyway, I got distracted by the whole wine thing. But like I said, if you're interested in that, you want a $100 wine voucher. And hey, these make great gifts too. So if you got in-laws or ex-laws like me, or a wife like me that likes to drink, hey, Germ, glad to see you. Shoot me a message and I'll get you the code for that $100 voucher. Like I said, you can't beat it with a stick, y'all. Anyway, so as if there hasn't been enough bizarre and macabre shit happening on this little island, believe it or not, it actually got worse. Oh yeah, hang on to your asses, folks. In 1922, along came a psychiatric hospital. You guys know I love talking about the nut houses, right? So anyway, this nut house was built with this very large and impressive bell tower. I really don't know why it had to have a bell tower, but it did. Anyway, now it's a party, right? Patients at this hospital immediately start reporting that they're seeing ghosts of plague victims. Most of them complained that they were being kept up because they were hearing tortured souls wail and cry and scream in agony. But because everybody already knew that these folks were crazy insane, nobody paid them any attention. They just upped the meds, right? So these poor bastards are locked up in the nut house, and they're easy targets for these tortured and sometimes extremely pissed off ghosts, right? That pretty much sucks on its own, but believe it or not, folks, it gets even worse. Seems that this doctor decided he was in a perfect position to make a name for himself. So he starts off his quest by experimenting on his subjects because he's going to find the cure for insanity. I've already found it. It's called naked wines. Anyway, this demented-ass doctor starts performing lobotomies and on all these little patients that couldn't defend themselves. So he's finding out early in the game that he really didn't have the right kind of tools or equipment to perform these procedures correctly. So he just was forced to make do with the shit that he did have right there, like hand drills and chisels and hammers and all those fun kind of things. So the patients that he focused his attention on were all moved to this bell tower where he would broaden his scope of experiments. These poor nut jobs were subjected to some serious tortures too, y'all. It's pretty sad. Damn sweet, I'll have to think about it. I really should. I'm hoping that you're talking about the wines and not the nut house, Chris. Anyway, according to local lore, after many years of performing all these heinous experiments, this evil doctor actually starts to see these tortured and plague-ridden spirits himself. So it's said, legend says, that this doctor was led to the top of the bell tower where he was either thrown or decided to jump to the grounds below. Now here's where it gets really creepy, y'all. The fall didn't kill him. He was still alive when he hit the ground. And this nurse ran out there to check on him, and she saw him writhing around in pain, but before she could get to him to help him, this mist comes rising up from out of the ground and choked him to death. Now it's rumored that this nut job doctor is bricked up in this hospital bell tower, and on a the bell can still be heard ringing all the way across the bay, even though it was removed when the nut house was closed down. Madness right there, huh? So later on, the Italian government, they take over the land, and it was sold again after that, and that owner actually abandoned the joint in the 1960s. Now, he was the last person that actually lived there full time. There was this other it's kind of recent, back in the early 2000s, that went to stay. They thought that they would buy this island and build a holiday home on it. So they get there to stay there, and the first night they're there, they leave in the middle of the night, and they absolutely refuse to comment on what happened to them. The only thing that was documented on them having left was that their daughter's face was ripped open and required 14 stitches. Sounds like they ran into one of those pissed off plague victims, right? So today, Poveglia is pretty much uninhabited, and touring the island is strictly forbidden. Every now and then the waves will still uncover some of those charred human bones. Now, there have been several psychics that have visited the island and the abandoned asylum, but they left terrified and didn't really want to comment on the things that they saw or felt there. Now, once in a while, there are a few daredevils that'll dodge the police patrols, and they'll go to, but everybody who's made it there has refused to go back, and they won't comment on what they saw either. What they will say is that it has a very heavy atmosphere. Now, some documented things that have gone down there are recordings, EVPs, from a more recent investigation of the screams and the moans that are heard there after darkfall. There is also a recording of what sounds to be a bell very faintly in the background of this recording, where there's no other sounds whatsoever. Now, from one report of this terrified thrill seeker who was actually busted when he left the island, he said that he went into the asylum, but he was only there for a second or two before this disembodied voice told him to leave immediately and do not return. He was in the process of doing just that when he encountered the shore police. All right, so we have covered haunted cemeteries, a church, a nut house, some Sasquatch kind of creature, a haunted island. Man, we've pretty much covered all kind of crazy stuff tonight. So let's just kick it up a notch, right? I have found a legend about the devil. No, I'm not talking about my ex. I'm actually talking about Satan. So we all know that the devil went down to Georgia because he was looking for a soul to steal, right? Well, I just found out that he went to North Carolina too. And legend says that he still visits there pretty frequently. Now, even though North Carolina is taking an ass kicking from another devil named Florence right now, we're going to focus on this one spot in particular that's up in the hills, somewhere not far from Harper's Crossroads. This spot is in Chatham County, and it's known as the Devil's Tramping Ground. It's not a place where the devil picks up tramps. Get that out of your mind. So what it actually is a very barren circle that's about 40 feet in diameter. And it's said that Satan comes there to do something against us, the human race. He paces this patch of ground as he conspires the ruination of all of us with a pulse and a heartbeat, right? Chris Jackson said, can I be greedy and go where the nut house is? If you want to go to a nut house, you can come right here to the Gibson compound. Southeastern Louisiana, Chris. Anyway, the circle was actually first documented to have been discovered in the late 1700s, but it had actually been part of Native American lore a long time before that. Now, the natives believed that it was a holy place where the spirits and their elders danced while they were performing all these magical and mysterious ceremonies, you know, where they were smoking the peace pipe. Anyway, they also believed that there was a very important holy man that was buried beneath the ground there, and that nothing was able to grow there just out of utmost respect for that important individual that was buried there. Well, the more common legends state that the ground there has been scorched by the hoof marks of the devil, and it's been poisoned by his curses upon mankind. And it's true that the soul's been tested time and time again for centuries by scientists and horticulturists and all those kind of people, but nothing that is planted there survives. Not any kind of seed will sprout there. Not even a weed will grow on this spot. Now, if that's not weird enough, here comes the scary, y'all. So apparently Satan is quite fond of this little spot, and he doesn't really care for it to be disturbed. Anything that is left laying inside that circle will be violently removed before sunrise the next morning. Doesn't matter how big, how small, dead or alive, whatever it is going to be thrown way far out of the devil's tramping ground. And you'll have to walk yards around this round circle before you find whatever that object was. So my first question was, why hadn't some idiot tried to camp out on it? Well, actually, there were a couple of idiots that were crazy enough to do that. And there were a few of them that pushed out in the middle of the night, and they left whining about they were hearing these strange noises and voices. And, you know, there are a few rumors, though, that some of them had enough balls to see it through. But it didn't really turn out so well for them. There were, as legend has it, only a handful of successful attempts, if you want to call them that. Now, these dudes all managed to spend the entire night there, but the next morning, each of them were found wandering around in the woods. Their hair had turned completely white, and they'd all lost their minds. Now, it's said that when these men went crazy insane, it was because when the devil comes to the tramping ground, he comes in his true form. And there's not a man on earth that can look at Satan's undisguised face and escape with his mind intact. It's maybe comparable to throwing a really good drunk, then waking up the next morning with an ogre spooning you. Don't shake your head. You know you've all been there. All right. So while we're on the subject of terrifying things, I'm going to tell you guys about a local family that got more than they bargained for when they bought a home here in Springfield, Louisiana. That's about 40 miles west of where I'm sitting right now. So this family had struggled for a really long time to get on their feet and get their own place. Well, they got one hell of a deal when they found this house. It was perfect for them and the two boys, or so they thought anyway. Well, the house was a foreclosure. It didn't need a little bit of work, but the price was really good, and the school district was good, and it was on a nice little chunk of ground. So after the deal settled, AJ goes and buys a camper for them to stay in while they're doing the renovations on the house. Well, while AJ's working at his day job, Janine's in the house taking care of some of the little minor repair projects. But it wasn't long before these odd little things start occurring. And of course, as they do, things progressed. Now, one afternoon, Janine was alone in the house and she's painting. Well, the radio turns itself on. So Janine actually turns itself off. So Janine gets down off the ladder and turns it back on. Well, it's off again in a few minutes. And then after the third or fourth time, she decides she's kind of spooked and she gives up the painting for the afternoon. So eventually the renovations are complete and the family goes ahead and moves in. Well, a month goes by and it's the oldest son's birthday. So Janine recruits her mother to come over and help decorate for the party. And as they're organizing themselves, she realizes there were some last minute things that she'd forgotten to pick up from the store. So she leaves her mom alone in the house while she makes a mad dash to the little market down the street. Well, something happened while she was gone, because when she drove up, her mom was running out of the house, pale and panicked. She was terrified, and she swore that something was in that house with her. Well, it wasn't long after that. It was late one evening when Janine was washing dishes. All of a sudden, it was as this icy cold hand rested on the back of her neck, and there wasn't anybody else in the kitchen with her. Something was poking her violently enough to cause her to drop the dish she was washing. So Janine has a heart condition, and right about now, her chest is pounding in terror, right? So she runs for the door, and as she does, something snatches a hold of her hair. Well, when she does get outside, she realizes that she really needs to get a hold of her heart meds. So she makes a mad dash back into the house, snatches her pills, and runs back outside. Well, later on, after she settled down, she tells AJ about all the odd little things that had been going on before. And then she tells him about the icy hand thing and something snatching at her hair and all that stuff. Well, AJ just kind of shrugs it off, and he's thinking that, it's a big home that they haven't really acclimated to, and maybe she's just a little out of sorts and tired because she's been working really hard on the renovations, and he was just a typical male that ignored his wife. So a few days later, Janine is in the house, and she's folding laundry, and she hears her little boy talking to somebody in another room. So she could see her other son outside playing. So who the hell is this kid talking to, right? Well, she sneaks in the doorway where the boy was playing, and she asked him, "Who are you talking to?" And he said he was talking to his friend. Well, Janine asked him what his friend said, and he told his mom that he said that he had to be his friend, otherwise he was going to hurt his mother. So Janine was kind of freaking out, but she was fighting to, keep a straight face and hide the fact that she was terrified from this little boy. So a few weeks later, it's time to get all the winter clothes down from the attic. Well, Janine calls her father to come over and come help. And while he was there, he witnessed a rosary on a door handle start swinging like a pendulum and then just stop cold. So all of a sudden, after that happened, there was this earth-shaking stomping sound that echoed through the entire house. It was so loud and so rattling that pictures started falling off the walls and plaster was falling from off of the ceiling, but there wasn't anything there that was actually causing it. So Janine's father yelled at the presence and told it to show itself, and it did. Janine ended up with 3 deep claw marks across her back. So that was about enough for Janine. So she sends the kids away to grandma's and grandpa's because Damn this, right? Well, when AJ got home from work, she tells him the story and shows him the scratch marks. AJ thinks that she's brushed against some nails in the attic and, just kind of blows her off again. Well, during this exchange, the door behind AJ opens and then slams shut all by itself. So finally, AJ kind of got a clue, right? So now AJ's like in full ghost patrol mode all of a sudden. And he decides it's a good idea to hang a few religious relics around the house. So they're walking around the house together and they got their Bible. And when they get to the kitchen, she puts the Bible down on the table. Well, AJ comes down from a ladder. He'd been up hanging a crucifix over the door. And all of a sudden the lights go out. The Bible starts vibrating on the table. So they haul ass out the door, and the Bible shuts on its own before they actually hit the door. Now, both of them actually believe that there was a ghost in the house at this point now. Janine comes up with the idea to put a recorder in the kitchen, thinking maybe they'd catch something to give them an idea of exactly what it was they're dealing with, right? So she makes a mad dash inside the house, slides a recorder onto the kitchen table, and then she runs back outside like a mad woman. Well, half an hour later, she runs back inside and grabs the tape recorder, and eventually she gets enough courage up and she decides to start listening to the recording. Well, at first, there wasn't really anything happening there. It was a whole bunch of empty silence, but then all of a sudden she starts hearing this low growling, and the snarling voice starts hissing, "She will die." So, a few days later, the family is back to living in the camper. Janine's hanging out laundry to dry, and the boys were playing out in the yard. So, a little while later, she hears this very unsettling silence. And you got little kids, and you don't hear racket, something's up. Somebody's into something. There's a problem, right? So she looks around and the boys were gone. She runs around looking for them, and she could hear their voices coming from upstairs inside the house. And she knew she had to get them out of there and away from whatever it was that was inside that house with them. So she goes inside and is following their voices, but she never finds the boys. While she's upstairs, something terrifying happens. And she gets trapped by some unseen force that has lifted her from the floor and pinned her against the wall. Janine said that it felt like there was this enormous weight on top of her, and there were these unseen hands that were just holding her pressed to the wall. Well, out of nowhere came this dawning voice that told Janine to look under. So she manages to grip a corner of the carpet, and she begins pulling it toward her. Well, she gives it one solid yank, and suddenly the entity released her. So she goes barreling down to the floor. Well, beneath the carpet, Janine found what she described as a satanic symbol that had been carved into the wood flooring. And as soon as she could stand, she hauled ass out of that house. So she runs out, and she's immediately relieved to see AJ and the boys outside. So she's trying to calm her ass down, and she tells AJ, just go upstairs. Well, this time, AJ didn't question her. AJ runs inside the house, and when he gets upstairs, he sees where she had pulled the carpet up. And he goes to check it out, and he sees all these symbols that had been burned into the floor. So he and Janine are now convinced that somebody had summoned a demon into that house, right? So AJ starts freaking out by now, and he calls the local minister seeking help. Well, when the minister arrived, he immediately sensed the presence of something evil in this house. So they start going through room by room with the Bible and holy water. You guys know the spiel, right? They're attempting to cleanse the house. Well, as things progress, Janine started getting really ill. And she was thinking that it was her heart acting up, because really, she's had enough reason for that to be kicking in right about now, don't you think? Well, AJ pulls her aside and finds her a place to sit down while he's, helping the minister get finished up with his cleansing ritual. Janine's chest was tight. She was having a whole lot of trouble breathing. Well, eventually she blacked out. So a little while later, the minister finished the rite and he left. AJ goes to check on Janine, and she's completely out of it. So he helps her into the car, and he's got intentions on taking her over to her mom's house. Well, while he's driving, he looks over at her and he asked her, "How you feeling now?" And she turns back to him, and in this guttural voice that was most definitely not Janine's, she said, "I'm fine." And then her eyes went pitch black. AJ floored it and hauled ass to her parents' house. Well, Janine's father helped AJ get her inside, and her pulse seemed pretty regular, but she was freezing cold to the touch. So her mama starts freaking out, and she wants to know what the hell's going on, right? Once again, this deep voice comes from out of Janine and says, "I'm fine." Well, with no other means to defend themselves, Janine's family start reading Bible verses until the minister could get there. So it was enough to actually allow her to regain her consciousness, just long enough to tell her father that the entity had been inside of her and taken her over. Well, when the minister arrived, he knew it was going to be a long night. So there was no doubt that their demon was still hanging out inside Janine. So AJ and her father hold her down while the minister performed this impromptu exorcism. And of course, it was one hell of a battle, but eventually she did regain control and the entity was gone. Janine and AJ packed their kids and their belongings into the camper and moved off of the property, staying at her sister's while they're trying to sell the demon house. Now, I do have a real estate license here in the state of Louisiana, and I can tell you that since all of this went down, that house actually sold. Have I talked to the new owners? No, I have not. I think they'll find out on their own, don't you? Hey, there's John Tomset. We will be hanging out with John and Terry Tomset in E-Town, Kentucky on October 28th and 29th. It's going to be one hell of a shindig. Come out, check us out. The original Batmobile is going to be there, along with the Adrian's Fury Dragster, myself, Big Johnny Blender, and a whole cast of other semi-celebrities and a whole bunch of other really cool people. My friend Rhonda's going to be there, and so is my boy Eddie Milburn. So if you need something airbrushed and you really want it to look badass, get your ass over to E-Town October 28th and 29th. Bring whatever it is you want airbrushed and have Eddie take care of it. There's Ronnie and Lori Oates. Clint is not online right now. Ronnie, I see that Lori beat you in the fishing game. At least you got beat by a pretty girl. You go, Lori. That's freaking awesome. Freddie said, hold on, I'm scrolling down. I'm having trouble keeping up with my comments tonight, y'all. Could just be the naked wines. That's some crazy shit. Yes, that was some crazy shit. And Susie said she's going to miss being there. That's where I actually got a chance to meet Susie and Mike Jones, along with Bill Gibson with a Christine car, Malcolm Denaire, and Miko. What is Miko's last name? I forgot him. Hughes. That's right, Miko Hughes. He was Gage from Pet Cemetery. And, of course, Malcolm was the driver of the Christine car in the movie. Malcolm is my love. He's insane, but I think he's still corruptible. I could work on that. All right, so this next story I got turned on to by Sammy Overstreet. Chris, see, this was something that was recommended to me by another avid listener, which I haven't seen sign on tonight, but that doesn't mean he's not there, Sammy. If you're there, I'm doing your story, babe. So Sammy messaged me and he asked me to look into William Granser Harrison. Well, I did, and here's what I found. So this dude, William Harrison, was born in the old 96th district in Edgefield County, South Carolina, sometime around 1789. He moved to Coffee County, Alabama in the 1830s, and he built this massive plantation right and Pea River. So he had two different bodies of water there. That's prime grounds for a plantation anyway. That spot is just outside of what is now known as Kinston, Alabama, so that may ring a bell for some of you folks. So Harrison built this massive plantation on a high bank that was overlooking Pea River, and I guess the romantic scenery can be blamed for him and his wife Nancy having several children. There was Elizabeth, Mary, Charlotte, James, Francis, Sarah, John, William, Moses, and Martha Jane. Yeah, folks, see, back in the old days, Harrison couldn't just get up and run to the 7-Eleven for a box of Trojans, so he got stuck with a litter of youngins. All right, anyway, let me tell you about the ghost story here. So Harrison was a fairly successful cotton planter, and that's, of course, when he wasn't making babies, but he was said to own the most slaves out of all the plantation owners in the entire county there. And he was also very well known for his barbecues and shindigs and horse races that he had every single Saturday if it was at all possible. Now, he absolutely loved entertaining the community, so much so that he had his slaves build this big-ass dance hall, especially for his shindigs. Now, during these massive social events, Harrison was known to strap on a pair of clogs and dance for his guests. Now, for you folks that don't know what clogs are, they're kind of like tap shoes, but instead of just the one piece of metal that's tacked into the bottom of the shoe, there's what's called a clacker that hangs loosely, so where if you shake your foot, it kind of rattles. I can tell you about clogs because I was actually a clogger back in the day. Probably could still cut a rug if I needed to, and actually danced at the World's Fair back in the 80s when it was in New Orleans. Yeah, let that sink in, folks. Anyway, so as they do, many years passed, and Harrison started realizing that the party was going to be over pretty soon. He knew that he wasn't going to live forever, so he starts making all of his final arrangements. And as you've probably already guessed, he was planning a rather elaborate resting place. So Harrison sends his slaves to this brick kiln all the way in Milton, Florida. And they start coming back with all these massive loads of bricks, and he has them start on this huge above ground tomb. So he's planning on being buried inside this tomb with his dancing clothes on and, of course, his clogs while he's lying on his feather bed. So he put this burial site within earshot of his beloved dance hall so that he could still be a part of it in some way. So in 1860, Harrison dies. His burial orders were followed exactly to the T. And as he'd requested, the Saturday night dances went on for a while. But without Harrison, it just really wasn't the same. So the attendance of the party started to dwindle down, and eventually the shindigs just were canceled, and the dance hall finally started falling into ruin. But apparently that wasn't enough to keep old Harrison from being the life of the party. The locals started having some pretty crazy experiences when they passed by the Harrison Cemetery at night. Folks were claiming that they could hear the eerie sound of fiddling and dancing coming from the cemetery. Other folks claimed that they actually were hearing this deep, booming voice of a man calling out square dances along with the sound of a fiddle. Of course, that was Harrison, right? So reports like these are going on, but there's more. Now, legend had it that Harrison had a large sum of gold buried with him there in that tomb. Unfortunately, that legend was proven to be just that, a legend. In 1964, these vandals rigged the tomb with dynamite and blew it to pieces, scattering Harrison's remains all over the freaking cemetery. And after all that, they found absolutely no gold. So, the cemetery, of course, is very active. You would think old Harrison would be pissed off, but he's not. He's still pretty cool about it, and you can still hear him out there from time to time. Now, there was actually the first investigation that was done out there, the first documented, legal, allowed investigation that went on out there by RIP Investigations. So they sent a crew out there, and they had some pretty impressive results for a first go-round. Now, not long after they'd set up there, one of the investigators named Hunter White got a hit. The name Harrison could be heard coming from out of the group's spirit box. Now, most of you folks, if y'all are tuning into the Twisted Southern Horror Queen show, you pretty much know what the spirit box is, but there may be some folks out there that don't. So let me explain that. A spirit box is kind of like it's a device that scans through different radio frequencies, which in theory, it gives a spirit a frequency to communicate with the living on. It gives them a platform, I guess is the easy way to say it. So anyway, after the first couple of hours there were these infrequent bumps that were going on in the EMF detectors, but really no major occurrences. Now, of course, an EMF detector is something that detects increases in the electromagnetic field, which, of course, by theory, is a sign of a spirit that's attempting to communicate. Now, electricity is the most obvious reason for an EMF spike, right? Well, there's obviously no electricity anywhere in the vicinity of Harrison's old tomb. So there's that. Now, Tim York, which was another one of the RIP investigators, he had a pretty good idea. I gotta hand it to Tim. He starts playing this old folk music, which of course included a fiddle. So as he's got the fiddle blaring right there next to what's left of the tomb, the EMF detector starts spiking off the charts. So York then plays this song. It's by a country duo named Granville Automatic. And the song was actually written about and dedicated to Harrison, which was titled Gran'sir Harrison. Gran'sir is a term of endearment, which means grandfather. So if you see Gran'sir Harrison legend, this is the same Harrison that I'm talking about. Now, this song was, like I said, based on Harrison's life, and of course it included fiddles. So as the song began, these EMF detectors start giving off these huge spikes, and then 3 separate EMF detectors, in fact. And then all of a sudden, this blinking light pops up on the tomb through the lens of one of the cameras that the team's got stationed out there. So the light starts pulsing rapidly, and it's going along with the beat and the rhythm of the music. And as the song sped up, so did the light. As the song slowed down, so did the light. So the group tried to debunk this light, and they set up 3 other cameras. They tried to recreate it in any which way, shape, form, fashion they could. Well, they couldn't. And on all 3 of these other cameras that were all filming from different angles, that light was still there as long as the music was playing. So pretty impressive results for a first investigation that was held out there, I thought anyway. So check that out if you get a chance to read further on that Gran'sir Harrison. Pretty cool little legend there. All right, so I've rambled for about an hour straight. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Like I said, if there's anything that you've ever wondered about or any legends you've heard about and you don't really know the whole story, give me what you do know about it. I'd love to dig into it. And of course, if I find enough documentation on it, I'll do a segment on one of my upcoming shows and of course give you a shout out. In the meanwhile, if you need to get your creepy on before next Tuesday night at 7 Central and 8 Eastern, go to authorlyngibson.com. You can check out my blogs there. Of course, check out my books, past shows, and of course, there's some pictures there from past events. And you can find me on Facebook at Southern Horror Queen. But in the meanwhile, you guys keep it cool and keep it creepy because you know that I will. We'll see you next week.